long time ago, when I was studying the European Romanticism, I came across a beautiful line by Goethe, which has stayed with me ever since. Architecture is prose and music. And since that time, whenever I traveled in different countries, cities, I try to hear this music. I try to understand what is the message, what are the values, what is the meaning of those spaces which humans build. Because each era created its own language, its own music. The Renaissance brought human dignity, proportions, symmetry and light into spaces. Baroque brought us divine drama, expressions, emotions, the play of shadows and light. Classicism had its clear language of logic, and the industrial era brought us steel, glass, speed. So each era had its own message. And the question which today we will explore is, what is our message? What is our music we want to freeze in the spaces we build? And we will start with education, as education is that kind of spaces where all people go through. Can these spaces, educational spaces, be learned? They can teach us what kind of values, what kind of meaning they can deliver. And another question, because if we just go back in history, in ancient Greece, when Plato's Academy, it was a garden. And learning happened in dialogue, in movement, in shared experiences, in presence. And when the industrial era came and this class lesson system has been developed, it has become, all classes become boxes with rows of desks, with bells, with timetables. Are these spaces, and I always question, are these spaces really for developing curiosity, developing thinking and creativity? Or are these spaces to control, to make us see, to make us follow? So today's talk is about future spaces, and we will explore we will move through three reflections. One is that architecture is the language of the time. What is this language? What is this music about? What is our meaning? What is our message we want to deliver to the future? Second area is education. Can we create ecosystems which will help us to develop thinking, curiosity, and creativity? And the third one is about sustainability, because right now our civilization goes through the crisis. We are in unpredictable era where we cannot predict what kind of natural disasters we can face the next moment. So that we need to take into consideration this environmental background, unpredictable. So can our spaces be flexible? Can they respond to these kind of changes? Can they adapt to these kind of changes? So these 3 points we're going today to explore. And we have, and I'm very happy to introduce you our guest today, Surya Kakani. He's an amazing architect. He was the dean of the Faculty of Architecture at SEPT University, and he is co-founder of Kakani Associates. So today we'll talk about these 3 points. And before we start our discussion, Kanika will introduce the format of our audience, communication with our audience, please.
I'm Kanika from the Research and Development team of Holistic Education System. The format for today's talk is going to be highly interactive. There'll be a discussion going on, and I want the audience to feel free to share their questions on the chat. The talk will be for 30 minutes, but depending on the questions we receive, we can take it up for 10 more minutes. Do engage.
And please don't forget to mention your name in the beginning if you send us messages, so that we can just communicate, having healing. So, 3 points, 3 reflections from where you would like to start.
Very interesting. I'm glad that an institution like this is actually looking at architecture as an important aspect of our daily existence. And three are the three reflections, as you said very rightly, rather than questions, also kind of overlap quite strongly with each other. As much as the first one, which is about what is the architecture of our time, to the notions of the issues that rise in front of us today, the last question, which is, and that is our time in that sense. So, in architecture, in that sense, always is a reflection of its time. Whether it is the glass box, the tall glass box, or whether it is an intimate space that has been designed for a certain purpose. It is the economic system largely that fundamentally drives the making of a space or an architecture. In the sense, when I say economic system, I mean the larger fundamental drivers of the economy. For example, in the city, in the present days.
Yes.
And in that sense, today all facilities are in cities. So there is a huge migration towards cities. So default, because of that magnet of the city has its problem, and then there is a demand on a limited supply of land. And default, that whole cycle works in that way, and then we end up having a certain kind of real estate which produces a certain kind of architectural response to that. A lot of these are very, we have to address these critically, and we have to begin to understand the larger making of the city and the need for making such mammoth, conglomerations. And we need to really question that at a larger scale in terms of the development model. So there is that development model that drives the making of a certain kind of our time of architecture. The critique of that would be because also the last 50 years, and you rightly said that the industrial revolution gave us boxes, but along with those boxes it gave us tremendous facilities. I know the industrial revolution produced quality of life that most civilization hadn't, most of humans hadn't seen and experienced for all these years. And today facilities are available to the last denominator as far as possible. And I think there is a striving towards that which is producing a certain kind of, where architecture has kind of become the machine in which you add.
Earlier it was art.
Yes, so the challenge is, even in the modernist times, people have, industrial revolution produced the modernist paradigm of architecture. And I think, and that was the struggle of the modern architects, to be able to create a language. To be able to create a language that, as you rightly use the word music of that time. What is the music of the industrial revolution? If I have to create an architecture out of concrete, steel, and the modern materials. So what is the music? So my material for music is different, and it is not stone as much as it used to be, because now there are other new materials. And so, steel, metals of all kinds, a certain kind of putting things up, structural knowledge. So all of those things, also certain kinds of facilities, all of those things together became the new, as I would say, as the architect as a conductor had all of these, people with whom all of these materials that he had to play have a rhythm with. And that produced some beautiful spaces, some of the marvelous examples of modernist architecture. But at the same time, the drive towards agglomeration, larger cities, has also created its challenges. We built more than what we need. We build much more than earlier times. And we are consuming, and in that sense, that's the biggest problem, that architecture has become the biggest consumer of material. And you must remember, every time we make a building, we have to remember that we are digging a hole somewhere. So the bigger the building, the bigger the hole. And so how much do we need? What do we need? Are we efficient in purpose? Are we keeping the materials that we need to be reusable, to be recyclable? Are we making sure that the materials that we use do not have high embodied energy? There is a whole concept, all materials basically are produced, today's time, are produced through some kind of energy. Whether it is mining, we mine the earth for materials. Then we make, cement, we burn a lot of fossil fuel and use lime and make cement. It's metal, any of the metals we mine, and we again use energy to melt the ore.
So we're talking about carbon footprint,
So,
architecture.
exactly. So what has happened in the last 50 years is this complex world trade order also, which has resulted that I can access anything. And all these materials travel a lot of distance also, many a times. And so there is a huge carbon footprint that we are now beginning to realize, because all of this energy that is used to produce these materials has also burnt a hole. Because all this carbon dioxide that's produced is finally landing up in the atmosphere. And that has created serious problems not only in the sky, in the atmosphere, but also the carbon dioxide that's absorbed by the oceans, where the temperatures of the oceans are going up and marine life is suffering. So there's a big cycle. So, and I think that is not my expertise, but we all are aware that as architects, we now need to respond to this time. How do we respond to that? And you also use a very interesting one. You use the example of the Greek, how education happened.
Yes,
all over the world. I mean, if you talk about India, it was the Gurukul system. You would sit under a tree and you would actually have a class. And you were with nature. And so the Gurukul system had a certain way of, so the nature was an integral part of. So the modern civilization, we have moved a little away, in many ways, away from, and we have compartmentalized our life. When we work in a so you want nature, you take a break for 10 days and go to nature. Now the problem is, can we make nature an everyday aspect?
Yes,
that's really the big challenge. I mean, very interesting things. Sometimes I'm interacting with children and I find they don't know that onions and carrots grow below ground. They think they will grow like lemons on trees because they saw an apple or a mango. So the separation
is
huge, and it's important that we somehow introduce nature as an everyday, and that because of nature we survive. Because the way the earth is, and that's how we have all millennia has survived. And if that gets destroyed, we are going to suffer. We are already, to some extent, the major extent, already suffering. So, and now coming back to the larger question, how do you respond as architects? How do we respond? There are two major levels at which, and if you look at the fundamentals of it, the physics, all building uses energy. One is the embodied energy, which is the making of the materials, whether it is paints, whether it is steel, whether it is aluminum, glass. Every material uses some kind of energy and is produced, and it comes and travels to you. That is the energy that goes into the making of the material is called embodied. So like wood would have least embodied energy, but at the same time in India we would have a very complex problem if you start cutting all the forests for the wood. So you recycle wood. So there is a balance. The second is the active energy, the lights, the air conditioners, all of those things, that all the other gadgets that we use for everyday living. That's the active energy. So if these two energies, if somehow we can reduce, which means the larger exothermic reaction that we put out onto the atmosphere would be reduced. So which means if you come backwards like that, can we use materials that have less embodied energy? Can we create through design spaces that don't need too much artificial lighting or air conditioning? That means that's the challenge for the design. That's the challenge for architecture.
Can I just a little bit slower because we're moving a little bit. And I have a question. I don't know.
Please, yeah.
I have a question because you said that right now architects are struggling to find their own language. But what I feel that right now what while we were discussing that the language is right now is language of convenience, and technology is a part of that.
Yes.
So that the values are not about mostly they're about physical availability and convenience. And another part is that when you touched the question of educational spaces, where not only actually educational spaces, but everywhere we really segmented, fragmented, and separated different functions, I would say, which, functionally we separated. And what I feel that perhaps right now, as we're facing these challenges, environmental challenges, and we're talking about energy, we're talking about materials, we're talking about different kind of structures, right? How to address this urbanization, how to address this kind of things, how to make nature a part of that. Is it possible? These are very big challenges we need to face. But the question is that can we find, if we start from having in mind that what is society is and what are the values, and shift to the part is that it's not about functionality, but it's about connection. And if to talk about school, for example, so that we can just a little bit be more precise, if it is not separate classroom, can it be flexible kind of spaces? Can it be, can we zone them differently so that it won't be just one age group in one class, closed, but some kind of fluid spaces? Is it possible? What is conceptually, what kind of ideas conceptual in architecture you can just share with our audience, where, the thought of architectures, so I believe that architecture is art, so we need to take into consideration so many things. You're absolutely right, starting with materials, everything, place, space, culture, because cultural context is always there, and we need to somehow address that. And I really love the architecture which reflects, not just same skyscrapers and every in Seoul, in New York, wherever you go, same skyscrapers. But what is that kind of cultural context which we need to
see? Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, which is the challenge that can architecture solve the problems? No. Architecture can address the problem. Because end of the day, architecture fulfills the format that is given by what is laid out. And if the curriculum of its institution says, it's wonderful what you expressed as this potential curriculum is phenomenal. If that is the brief that's laid out, then the spaces have to reflect that.
Yeah.
Now, it's always the brief, it's always the fundamental that needs to be addressed first. And in that sense, if the curricula is laid out in a certain way, as you expressed, nature, interaction, relationships, and flexibility.
Even co-learning, what I believe, because now we have these co-working spaces for different people.
Absolutely.
Why not co-learning spaces for parents or different multi-age groups? So
Yes.
that schools can be not just that kind of traditional
Absolutely.
walls, but spaces where different people can come and co-learn.
No, absolutely. I think these are amazing ideas, and I think we should strive for that. As we strive for that, we will have to work towards reorganizing our curricula in a way that we allow those formats to happen. And if those formats are laid out to an architectural fraternity, I'm sure the fraternity can potentially, there will be architects in the fraternity who can very powerfully, kind of address this kind of requirement. And the point is, what are those kind of spaces? And those spaces are places where you can go in and out, and you want nature to be able to, you want the bird to fly through, you can actually walk out in the shade, and in a way that is also in one with the place, in the sense the culture. It doesn't, because see, the other problem that we're also having is technology has also provided us with a touch of a button, we are able to do anything. I can touch a button and I get light, touch a button. In fact, now not even a button, a mobile swipe right? So buttons are also
Soon in our cheeks,
yes.
we will just think about life.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe you can just move your eyelid, Google Lens, you move your eyelid and things happen.
Nothing to
So,
do, just.
yeah, so I think the other aspect is more and more the only thing that we have left to do with our hand is a swipe. There were times when we had to use our hands to create so much, whether it is food, whether it is art, whether it is making up your own spaces. Now you will call somebody to design your space, put your furniture. You will call somebody else to make it food. You will call somebody else to do something else. They are all specialists. Earlier times, probably people were habituated to be able to do things with their own hands. And I think there is a very strong connection between what the hands do and what the mind develops. So if today the hand is only swiping, the mind is also imagining, also evolving in its own way. Now good and bad, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we will sit again hopefully and get there. As of now, this is what it is. And there is a large movement of people who are now talking about these issues that we're talking about. And there are people who are interested in understanding how do we reconnect with the issues that you have laid out. How do we relate to each other better? How do we work and produce things? How do we enjoy? There is the whole concept of slow life. There is a whole world that is beginning. Copenhagen has come out with a law, and few years, not now, some year, 15-minute nature. Within 15 minutes,
Yes,
you should be able to go in nature.
absolutely. I believe that it should be, you see, somewhere as rules, created by the policymakers. So
Exactly.
the nature part will be a part of our educational spaces, educational curriculum. In this case, architects.
Yes. So this is architects operate within precinct. Larger policy planners, there are planners.
Yeah.
That's the whole, because there's economics, social science, geography, a lot of things that come into the planning paradigm. And there are planners who decide. But the conceptual concept has to be pushed through by the demand of the people. We have to tell our people, okay, we have, as a democracy, ideally we should be addressing the people who make the laws, our governance system. That we are not happy with what we have. We need these things. And as we continue to talk like this, and we are able to generate a discussion amongst all of us and more of us, I'm sure it's a matter of fact. Already I find a lot of children who have now become adults, who actually come back and want certain kinds of places. They want to reduce air conditioning in their spaces. They don't want too much artificial light. They want some kind of nature into their spaces to be got in. So that means there is an awareness now that people are already feeling the heat wave, and I think that reality that the air conditioner is creating a certain cool space within the spaces we sit, but actually it is heating up the city. It's also people are realizing these things, and I think soon at some point laws will come. We always say you cannot throw garbage on the street, right? There will be a time when people will say, listen, the hot air in your plot or in your building should not cross your building. You cannot, your hot air cannot come into my space. Now, there will be a time when that's going to happen. That's because, if there is a large building next to your building and if that building has got all air conditioners pumping 60 degrees out onto the next door house, what rights do they have between each other? I think these are questions that we will have to begin to ask. That air pollution we're talking about heat as a pollution.
Yeah.
And heat is polluting my space, but there is no law for that. We're only talking of AQI in terms of the pollutant, the size of the particle.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the component of heat as pollution. And we're talking about it as heat wave. But we need to begin to address this at many levels. And architecture has to resolve, architecture can only architecture can keep providing solutions. Like you make certain kinds of walls, you make certain kind of ventilation, you provide certain kind of air cooling versus air conditioning, you provide good ventilation, you provide certain kinds of planting spaces within the building at different levels, such that you are still not cut off from ground. So those are things which architecture can definitely address, along with the idea of using materials that don't have high embodied energy. It's like I don't have to get steel that has to be traveled, 20,000 kilometers. It's the same thing. I mean, sometimes we also talk about, we all love cheese that's made in Europe, but, if you think about the miles that cheese has traveled, if you look at the carbon footprint of that cheese, it's ridiculous. So it's the same with steel and same with many materials that can't be imported. Italian
It's just
marble.
from ourselves, we all are.
Yes, Italian
We
marble.
have common.
We have enough stone in this
As
country,
humans.
but we want Italian marble. So, are we ready to address that? Are we ready to be able to talk to our own selves and our own peers and be comfortable with,
Changes.
with what we have with us around us and live with that versus having to portray an image of
This is
ourselves?
about actually values. This is about how we live our lives. Because because our talks and previous talks, we touch these things. Because whatever you just start thinking about, it's all about values. Even for example, technology or AI, whatever. I mean, it's not about actually that some app is not good because it steals your time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the app, it's about you.
Yeah. So, values are important. Definitely, there's one very famous book, I forget the author. All that I ever wanted to learn, I learned in kindergarten. Honesty, speak the truth, be clean. In all the fundamentals. If the book says that I learned in kindergarten. If those and these values, if they get imbibed right, the rest is,
And in right spaces, because I really strongly believe that different spaces they create different energies. When you go to the temple, you feel absolutely different, not only because people pray there, but even through architecture.
Yes.
This message is given,
Yes.
this kind of different energies.
Yes.
Same schools can change so that they can
Yes.
provoke different kind of
Yes, the
feelings.
schools are the new temples, are the gurukuls,
Absolutely.
are the gurukuls of our times.
Yeah.
And schools are very important as negotiators to teach the teachers, the students and the teachers the relationship of how to live with nature, how to address their life as they go on. So the idea of the institution of teaching in schools as such, and where does architecture come into this as a space, is a lot to do with, as I said earlier, the kind of formats of education that people are ready to explore. And so, as I say, do you create spaces that have a lot of nature in it? We have tall buildings now. We don't have a choice. Even does that mean that you cannot create delight? As designers, as architects, we will have to figure a way out that this is the challenge of our time. We will have to create delight in tall. We will have to create delight in a way that these tall spaces can also become equally intimate. What are those things? What are those challenges? And I think this is what I think the fraternity is also grappling with. And there are some solutions that are wonderful, and some that are struggling, some that have not been able to make it. But I think that is going to be an ongoing question. The larger question is a very fundamental question, the philosophy of our time.
Yeah.
How do we want to curate that? And what does it take to curate that? One is, as you mentioned, the format of curricula. The second is policy. And all of that, if comes together.
And readiness of people to, be a part of this kind of different spaces. Because if the whole your life you lived in a square room, I don't know, or something, so it's very difficult to move to different places where there are no walls. And you feel very uncomfortable, even psychologically. Are people psychologically ready? And we need to talk, we need to explain, and we need to give an exposure so they can feel differently. Because anyway, in architecture, planning, rules, regulations, everything. So they're for people, right? For people which need to live in harmony between, as a society, to take care of the future generations as well. and its nature. But may I just ask if we have any questions received?
We did have a question that was towards the beginning of the conversation, but I think that's been aptly addressed. The question was around, it was from Seher, and it said, in what ways can architecture design minimize waste and promote reuse and recycling? I think we've explored it sufficiently. I have a question. So we started the conversation with talking about art that inspires, and then you gave an alternative angle of art that responds to the people, right? Art that meets the needs of whoever is getting it designed. And I was wondering if we can have architecture that inspires. I was thinking of, for example, when you're talking about boxes, I was thinking about my visit to Matri. As somebody who knows nothing about architecture and probably has that box mindset, when I enter that space, it does something to me. The material does something to me when I touch the floor with my feet, the air does something to me, the shapes, the light, everything does something to me, and it shifts my mind. Right? So I was wondering how can architecture, so they're both influencing each other, right? Architecture and people. People drive architecture response. Can architecture also inspire for people to then move in the direction?
No, absolutely, wonderful question. And absolutely important and valid. Yes, architecture can inspire, can move, and it has done over centuries. And I guess some of the wonderful examples of the various eras Marina talked about earlier. So I think, no doubt. The point right now here is there are certain special spaces architecture can respond. What is so, and that itself will have to be addressed in that direction. And there are wonderful places where schools are, where children have really, many people come and they remember their alma maters. There's a school we did in Rajkot way back in post the earthquake. I still get so many students who pass out of that school. I mean, it's unbelievable. I went to Rajkot the other day on some talk, and there were about 20 of those students who had come together. They said that space, what it did to them, and how they've grown up for 12 or years that they were there, that they feel that they have never been, that they cannot, be more happy. They were so happy about that space, and that is, credit goes to, Dr. Kiran Patel who actually imagined that institution and put it up as a format. And so there was somebody who imagined it and then gave us that space to operate, and it was a successful collaboration. And so there are places, and where people are moved. So, yes.
What I can add is that what I feel from your this example, beautiful example, that when some concept, some values, some meaning, some message comes, it is framed, it comes to the architecture. Architecture has a soul to work with, right? So that it gives this body, these spaces. But my question is that how many, I would say clients you have which have that kind of message, and they want to deliver some kind of message, values, and meaning through their spaces? Or it's just about efficiency, it's about do it fast, do it cheaper, or it's just mostly it's about economical? I'm just curious.
No, I think it's a very, in fact, this is the fundamental question. They want all of that. No,
Which meaning?
With meaning.
Wow, that's great.
See, that's the challenge of the times, right? You have to be efficient, it has to be economical, it has to be inspiring, it has to operate in the larger format of thinking. So, we also work with people who have similar kind of, we are comfortable working with people who have those kind of beliefs. And for many times, there are people who are not able to express. But the way we work, most people will obviously come with certain clarities of function. That this is the larger purpose of their company. But I think in the back of their minds, they understand that this particular practice has a certain way of looking at things. So they do not maybe express it, but they understand, and that's why they're in front of you. And then it's your challenge, it's your job, it's your thing to take it forward in the way you imagine it, taking their purposes, taking their functions, and creating something that also adds more value to it in terms of nature, in terms of efficiency, in terms of all the other sustainable aspects we talked about, and a place of delight in the end. In the end, the fundamental job of architecture is to be able to create delight. If you can create delight, being sustainable, being economical, being all the minimum carbon footprint, I think you.
Nice. This is fascinating. Because you see, what I feel that, nowadays, when I see different spaces, I visit different countries, and I feel this lack of beauty and delight for me. In my understanding, it's when you can, because I understand the beauty as a thing is quite. You don't have that general concept of beauty, because actually culture as well is old. That's why context. We don't have that general concept of beauty. Each culture generates own. That's why context is very important. Generations, because culture is something which we just feel that and you just carry on this connection, so that the future generations of your country.
In some sense, delight and beauty is universal. In some sense,
it
is universal. Yes. So I think different cultures find different ways. Delight and beauty is universal. In some sense, most of the global south. Different cultures find different ways to express. People have been doing amazing things in this country, in these parts, most of the global south furniture. We have a huge amount of traditionally worked with hand. People have been also because the industry hasn't really, whether it's seeped in so strongly over 200 years away, people have traditionally worked with hand. No. Also because the industrial revolution has not really seeped in so strongly over 200 years in the way and it's already now global. There is no realization. The industrial revolution has come here moving away from 50 years in many ways to speak. And it is pervading. Already now there is the realization that people earlier we are moving away from architecture. As practice, what we already had, at least as a practice, ability to do things is to see earlier, to be able to involve architecture, people with skills. As practice, what we be able to have, like in this practice, I will not make skills. Is to see, to be able to involve a lot of other skills people can actually put into you. People who are, like in this country, we have a lot of masonry, like this wall. We have a lot of carpets made by hands. We have a lot of other skills which we can actually put into use in the building. At least you're like this wall people, you're having a relationship by hand. It cannot more the machines in the project, so the less the relationship. At least the more the people in the project, there are people. So you're having a relationship. So if you are able to more the machines in the project, the less the relationship. The more the people in the project, the potential for relationship. They feel a part of. So if you are able to use more people with craft, not to speak of everyone social doing things with them, which are related fundamental philosophical. They feel a part of the larger building process. Not to speak of employment and social equity. They feel part of the I think the fundamental philosophical reasons are not is to be relegated, but and lost even in the simplest relations, that they feel part of the larger. So as architects, we have it's not having to be relegated. As a practice, we try and then find this architecturally holistic sense. So obviously, we have it's a full circle. As a practice, we try, but you keep look at this to address the maximum sense in that circle. Obviously, there are challenges. You cannot have these full circle of all the time. You have to move, but you cannot be addressed maximally in that circle as much as possible. And we personally do not believe, and we move forward. You have to move forward. You cannot be I say that only as a all of these things will I work with as a philosophy. You have to personally do not believe in move forward and keep moving and being in time, where you say that only if you do all of these things will I work with you. Or you have to work with what you have and move forward and keep moving, and with that, and in time you move forward. Things will become, more amenable to some of these concerns. With that hope,
she's asking if AI can help solve the optimization problem so that she's asking if create better being able to solve AI can help solve the optimization problem so that people can create better
I'm not an expert on AI. I think it is still so even in architecture, I think
doesn't help.
It is a field that I'm not an expert on AI.
No,
and I think it is still,
architecture.
so it is an architecture. I think in the sense where people can talk of images. It is a field that is still like out the rolling. 20 things they presently and their use of AI is extremely superficial in the sense where people can talk of images. AI people still need like out the 20 things they need and their AI answer is make project and kinds of. But AI still needs to be imbibed with information probably about AI in the end may also diminish our own abilities that you want to reduce or increase, connect the dots. So right now the neurons in the end may connect the dots, also diminish our own abilities to put things in a certain way, connect the dots. We are actually reducing the neurons in our brain, connect the dots, our independence are able to put things in a certain way. Now if you are a strong believer, actually reducing autonomy, then independent questions at you. There will be a lot of strong believer useful. So it is something that is then thrown out there. You may want to question that. Let the world be a lot of areas where their policy will come in. So but it is something that I'm sure will be thrown out there. It will be phenomenal. But let the world figure out, and then the policy world of AI. But I'm sure there will be some processes that are really phenomenal mind. But we have to be careful. We have to navigate this world of AI discernment. We have to be aware with clear discerning what we need out of it.
This is what
In that sense.
all our talks are about.
So we need discernment. We have to be aware who we are and what we need out of it.
This is what all our talks are about. It means that kind of understanding that first of all we have to understand what we really want, because it's not about AI, it's not about architecture, it's not about different topics, it's not about AI, who we are, or whatever AI can want, how we feel. What about you can future, we want you can feel, you can experience. It's not about AI how to do whatever AI can talking about. What about you can which you can feel, you can experience, and their potential, their reactions. We're talking about different kind of art in people which can be instructing and their potential, their mental presence can work. It's a huge topic to discuss.
Yes, we can go on.
So we can someday continue this factors. I would like it's a huge topic to discuss.
Yes, we can go on.
So we can someday continue this factors. Feel. I would like to ask you. For example, if people face this any kind of challenge to feel, what is the effect of being to give them to space this, that space is any challenge you want to give, because I have different energies to give them to they can feel how to feel that spaces they have the different energies, they can feel better and they can actually change spaces. Can they change anything in their lives to make it better? But I mean, having in mind spaces. I mean, as an architect, I don't know, there's a feng shui or something, move this port to the left.
No, I know it's simple.
I mean, as an architect, I don't know, there's a feng shui or something, move this port to the left.
No, I know it's something simple that makes me feel something should be intimate, and makes my space should be delightful. What makes you feel delightful may be something that
create their
makes
own
me feel
spaces,
something
or they
else.
just come
And
just
makes
leave.
my
They
sense
just
of
take it
intimacy,
for
my
granted.
sense of that delight may be a
But do
little bit,
people create their own
you may
spaces,
feel
or
that
they
you're
just
not
come
capable and
and just leave? They just take it for granted.
places which that is that
But I have
so
professional, it's okay.
you may feel
What
that
I
you're not
want,
capable
very
and you involve professional to make
simple one. You can
spaces
try,
which have this.
but I have actually professional, it's okay. But what I want, very simple one. Very simple one. We can change the rules between it's just an advice, because just try to change different kinds of colors, different colors, make it different, or you can change the rules between family members at home. So let's just try to
do this
different
because
kind
they
of
keep
colors,
doing
different kind
reorganizing
of
the furniture
textures,
and they do
different
organize
kind of
the
arrangements. So
I think that must be the enough. A lot of houses do this because they keep really organizing the furniture and they do organize their tapestries. I think that must be the inner creative. It is a way to be creative. Every human being, every human being has the inner urge to be creative. Food It is where you need to find that offering. Some do it, some do it clothing.
I agree.
Some do it with just simply living their life through the day. Photography. Some do it through clothing.
I agree.
Some do it with just simply living their life through the day. The problem with the modern day, it probably is that maybe as long as because everything is and I think order or a swipe or a
Yes.
the problem
Don't order
maybe
anything. Do yourself. Create something. Create your own
because
space.
everything
This
is
much.
as so maybe so that I think
Yes.
that
Don't
maybe
order
keep your hands
anything. Do yourself. Create something. Create your own spaces. This is actually.
so maybe so that I think just keep your hands busy.
Create your own spaces, make them flexible, and increase whatever, I would say, generative culture, create your own spaces, make them flexible, do free, whatever, so you can do carpentry or just paint something.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Just bring your
It's been a pleasure.
this kind of conversations, busy, and you see you next time. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, for coming
It's been
and
a pleasure.
taking this kind of conversation. So, see you next time. All the best.